Hello, I'm Graziano Marcheski, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of Shalom World Television's Heart Talk, in which we bring you one-on-one conversations with many of the bishops of the Roman Catholic Church from around the world. Today we're very blessed to be speaking with Bishop Marcelino Antonio Maralit, who is the Bishop of Boac in the Philippines. He has come all the way here to the Chicagoland area, and we were privileged to be able to spend a couple of hours talking with him and getting a sense of who he is, not just as a bishop, but as a man, as a priest. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. So let's go in and speak with Bishop Juni, as he's known not only to his friends, but also to his faithful. Welcome to Shalom World Television.
Thank you, Graziano.
We're delighted to be interviewing Bishop Marcelino Antonio Maralit, otherwise known as Bishop Juni.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you are known in your whole diocese by that very personal, family kind of name, which I think says a lot about you and probably says a lot about the kind of ministry. But before we talk about your work as bishop, tell us about your family. You grew up in the Philippines, a land where the church is strong and has a great influence. Talk about growing up, about the influence of your family that helped you to become the man that you are.
Oh, yes. Because people usually say in the Philippines to certain parents that they're so lucky to have a son who is a priest or a bishop. But me, when they tell me that, I usually say, no, it's the other way around. I'm lucky because I belong to my family and I had parents like the ones I have.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town, Lipa City, in the province of Batangas. And I belong to a middle-class family. And interesting enough, we lived like 20 or 30 steps from the church.
Huh.
So we're like neighbors.
Yeah.
I always woke up with the bells tolling in every morning. And then almost every day I see my mom and my grandma going to church. And then every Sunday we go as a family to church. And then just like every other Catholic family, they send their children to Catholic schools. So I grew up in that setting.
As a bishop, how is that need for family? Obviously, you love people. Obviously, family was very important to you. How do you meet that need for family?
I always tell people that everything starts in the family. God has so ordained the world that no matter what we do, in the Philippines, for example, they keep on telling, when you're a good priest, they say, oh, you come from heaven. I always tell them, no, that's not true. I came through my family. And usually God makes the family the path from heaven and to heaven. Mm-hmm. So I always believe in that. I always try to inspire people to look at the family that way, that holiness starts in the family.
So as you grew up, can you look back and point to any influences that pushed you toward priesthood?
Oh, there will be a lot of that. Because first, my grandparents, especially my grandmom, her daily prayers, her daily trips to the church, that's one. Second, she's very, very friendly with priests. I always grew up seeing priests in her house. And she always gave them gifts. She always gave them fruits. So that was a beautiful image for me, how my grandma took care of priests. And of course, she always told us, her grandchildren, one day, her dream was to have a grandson who would become a priest. Then was my mother. My mother, of course, was also one of her dreams, that one of her sons would become a priest, because there were 4 of us. And I also grew up knowing that I have a grandfather who was a priest, the cousin of my grandmom. And then with that, I became an altar server in our church, and seeing the priests there in the church also, how they were very exemplar in the way they treated people, how kind they were, how generous they were. This was a very big influence on me. And then the schools where I went to, both of them were Catholic schools. The first one was a school where nuns were running it, and it was under the Canossian sisters. The nuns there were very kind, and they always tried to encourage a lot of the young students there to think about entering the seminary. And then I went to the school of the Lasallian brothers. And I always remember a religious brother. His name is Brother Ceci. He was a very big influence because he loved going with us, playing basketball and going on bikes. And when we did that, he kept on talking about the priesthood and the religious life. And I always remember that I wanted first to become a religious brother. But he was the one who told me, no, become a priest. Be a priest, go to the seminary. Because my eldest brother wanted to become also a religious brother. So he was like, we already have your brother. You go to the seminary. So all of those things together, I think was a very, very big influence in my life. To just think about entering the seminary at first.
As a priest, you served in lots of capacities. You were on the Presbyteral Council, you were a pastor, you were a professor and a rector of a seminary. Talk a little bit about that experience, and then I want to ask which one of those things you actually enjoyed the most.
As a priest, the one that I enjoyed the most especially is becoming a pastor. Because I always dreamed when I was a seminarian that being a priest is being a priest in the community, in the parish, seeing my uncle or my grandfather, and then seeing these joyful priests when I was an altar server. That's the kind of priest I was dreaming of. But I guess God has His own way of trying to show you that being a priest is not only about that, because from the very beginning I became a professor in the seminary. And it was only in my last 2 years before I became a bishop that I was given this chance to be in a community.
I see.
So it was a different experience. But the joy in being a priest in the seminary is the joy of being in a community of priests, because there were like 10 priests in the seminary. All of us were professors. All of us were living in the seminary. That was a joyful moment.
So you studied in Pamplona in Spain.
Yes, I did.
And then you went to study in Rome.
In Rome.
To do your postgraduate
Yes,
work.
I did.
So what was it like for this Filipino boy to arrive in Rome and eat all that pasta
Oh,
and
my goodness.
learn the Italian language?
At first, especially when I went to Spain, it was a scary moment for me. Because I grew up in the province, more than an urban type of setting, it was a rural type of setting. So just to leave the province, that was a scary thing for me already. So to leave the country, that was double the scare I had. The funny thing was that when I got there, oh my goodness, I had to sometimes try my best to understand everything, but the language was so different. It was Spanish. And when I got there, people were laughing. I didn't know why, so I also laughed, even though I didn't understand why. Just to say that, oh, no, I'm okay, I'm okay. So I was also laughing. That was the part wherein I found so much difficulty, but that lasted only for about 2 months. Because after 2 months, you got into the language, and then you started understanding everything, and that was fun already. And then, of course, you get to have a new perspective in the world, about the world, because from the Philippine setting, rural setting, you suddenly find yourself in a different world. Yeah. And that was a gift also. And then I went to Rome. Rome is another thing, because Rome, you only see that in the movies, you only see that in pictures. And there I was, studying in Rome. And the funny thing was, I celebrate the same birthday with Pope John Paul II. We're both May 18. And when I was studying in Rome, every birthday, I went to St. Peter's. And every May 18, people are singing happy birthday. So I was like, oh, they know my birthday. And it was fun. My stay in Rome was fun. And every stay I had studying and preparing myself for my future job in the seminary was fun. Because I was surrounded also by a lot of great people.
When you were named a bishop, did that come as a surprise?
Oh yeah, that was a big surprise.
Tell us about your reaction to being invited to accept this new ministry by the Holy
I would
Father.
remember that because December 16, I was scheduled to meet up with the nuncio, the apostolic nuncio. When they called me up for that appointment, I was just thinking about why would they call me up to Manila? And I said, now I know. Because then the Holy Father was scheduled to visit the Philippines on January 2015. I was called,
This is Pope Francis.
Yeah, this is Pope Francis. I was scheduled to meet up with the nuncio on December 16, 2014. So I did go, thinking that I was going to be asked to do something for the visit, like translate stuff or even be the translator or interpreter of the Holy Father. That would be fun, I said. Okay, so I did go. It was early in the morning. It was 8:30 I was scheduled. And then the nuncio told me, if you could come earlier, it would be better, because he had an appointment with the government officials to prepare for the visit of the Pope. So again, that gave me a mindset of, oh, really, this is going to be for the visit. And then I sat there, the nuncio, quite serious, gave me a letter and said, open it up and read it. So when I opened it up, saw the letter and started reading it, there it was. You are appointed to be the bishop of the Diocese of Boac. And I was like, oh.
Of course, you said yes immediately.
Nah. How I wish I could have had that ability to say yes immediately. But what I asked the nuncio was, could I say no to this? And to that, he said, please pray over it first, and we will give you a week to think about it, then we'll call you. So immediately after that, I went back to my province, to Batangas, and one of my favorite places of prayer is always the Carmelite monastery. I went there. I went to the Blessed Sacrament and just sat there. And I gave that question to God. Is this really what you want from me? But the problem of that moment was when I was praying before the Blessed Sacrament, all alone there, I suddenly was flooded with a lot of memories of my childhood, of my recent past. And the sad thing, I don't know if it's a sad thing, but I guess it's a blessing more than anything else, is that I kept on remembering the past that was wrong, the sins of the past. And it so overwhelmed me that I started crying before the Blessed Sacrament. And funny enough, one of the nuns came in, saw me crying. And she approached me and said, Father, please, please, we will pray for you. Please, don't get out of the priesthood. Because she was thinking I was having a problem that I was offering to the Blessed Sacrament. And sister, you don't know what's happening. Please go out. I'm praying here. But I was so overwhelmed by the experience that I was so sure that that moment was a moment wherein God was telling me, don't accept it. Because everything I saw was everything that was wrong in my past. So I said, oh my goodness. So I just went back to the parish where I was working. And after 3 days, I received a call from the nuncio's secretary. And he was asking what my decision was. And I told him, I thought you gave me a week. Then he said, no, because Rome is asking us. Then I said, well, anyways, if you really want my answer, and then I'm saying no anymore. I don't want to accept this anymore. Then he said, why? I told him the story of that moment of prayer. Then he said, no. We'll give you more time to pray. Then I said, I don't think anything would change. Because if I started praying again, most probably I'll have the same experience. Then he said, what do you want to do? I said, if you really want me to think differently, can I please talk to somebody else about this moment, about this experience? Because we were not allowed to tell anybody about the appointment. So he said, yes. He said, okay, to whom do you want to talk to? Then I said, I want to talk to Bishop Ray Evangelista, who was the predecessor from the diocese where I'll be appointed to. So, okay. He said, okay, I give you the permission. So immediately I tried to call up Bishop Ray, and when I got hold of him, I told him of my experience. And then he started laughing at me. And then he said, you know what, Junie, this is the best moment for you. Because now I'm sure you are the man for the job, because your experience is the best experience to have. And I said, why? Because I saw this as a moment wherein God is telling me not to accept it. Then he said, no, different. It's the other way around, he said. The most beautiful thing about your experience is that now you see that you're going to become a bishop not because of your talents, your abilities, not because you're that good. You're only going to become a bishop because of God's goodness, of God's grace.
So when a new bishop comes to town, usually he has to take the reins of the diocese and establish new goals and new priorities. What are some of the special goals that you've set for your diocese?
Well, I don't know if it's right to say that we establish new goals. When I got there, the first thing I had to do was feel myself around the diocese to see where things are, to know what my predecessor left us with. And since I knew him and I know the kind of person he is, how organized he is, I already knew. I had it quite easy because the only thing I think I had to do was follow what he left us with and try to see where from there go and try to see where the church needs me to lead them to. And one of the things I saw was one of the most beautiful things he left us with was the organization of the church into basic ecclesial communities. That's one. It's very strong there. So I already knew I had to either reinforce that or try to make these basic ecclesial communities more involved in the life of the church. So that's one. The second one was that when I got there, there was this beautiful program of feeding the whole island. All of the hungry was being fed. And I discovered that the food was coming here from the U.S., from a foundation named Feed My Starving Children, which I think we have here in Schaumburg. I went into that program and saw that part of the program they have already done. But what's left is the more important part, which is basically education and livelihood. They have been feeding the people, but they still have to continue on with trying to educate the people and then trying to establish livelihood programs so that the people will learn how to feed themselves. So again, I saw that. So I said, this would be the next step. And then one of the things that I also saw was how to take care of our priests. Sadly enough, although that's our reality, our diocese is poor diocese. Since it's a poor diocese, our priests are very, very poor also in that sense. They have to pay for their social security, they have to pay for their medical insurance, but they were earning, I had two priests who were earning like about 5,000 pesos a month. And that's like $100 a month. So I was thinking, oh, how about these priests? And then when priests get sick in our diocese, they pay for their own medical fees. So I said, this is not good because priests will have problems eventually, and I have to take care also of my brother priests. So that's one of the things I followed up, and it's a gift that we were from another diocese. Our mother diocese was the neighboring diocese across the sea. That's 3 hours from us. And the bishop there was a good friend. He was my professor and a good friend. So I kept on nagging him and almost like blackmailing him. To consider our diocese as a diocese who could benefit from their diocesan hospital. And to my, I guess it's another of God's blessings, he suddenly told me, okay, give me a contract, an agreement, and I'll sign it. So I made an agreement, and I sent it to him, and he signed it. So all our priests, when they're sick, they get medical treatment for free in the diocesan hospital. So that's another step I had to make. And then the third step I saw that as a bishop I had to continue was there to be transparent about the finances of the church, and then to make sure that the finances will be used the way they should be used. My predecessor already started doing that, but after 8 years there, it was not enough time to do that. So when I got there, I knew what I had to do. So I had the blessing of having a good predecessor. So the only thing I did was continue with what he had and make sure that it was going towards the goal that it was set to be.
You became involved with an organization called Cancer Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about that, and especially about the impact it had on you personally.
Yes, that was one of the most beautiful gifts God gave me in my life as a priest, not even as a bishop, as a priest, as a young priest. Because when the Cancer Warriors came into my life, I was already a seminary formator. I was a professor, I was not a director. And somehow I was kind of losing my priesthood back then. I got into a lot of things, business and stuff like that. Well, the human side got the better of me. And for that reason, I was already in a crisis, really. But suddenly, a mother and a child came to the seminary one day asking for help because this mother was starting to cry, and she was telling me that her son had leukemia, and he was 10 years old back then. And I said, well, the compassion in us is always there. So I said, don't worry, I'll try to help you. But I was ignorant what it meant to help somebody get treatment for cancer. I just simply said, don't worry, I'll take care of whatever you need for your son. But I never realized what that meant. I was earning like 3,500 pesos a month in the seminary. And I was like, what, $70? And here I am offering that I'll be paying for everything. So the bills were coming in every month. The mother was asking me for 20,000 pesos, 25,000 pesos to pay for the bills of the chemotherapy of this young boy. So I said, oh my goodness, I'm not gonna be able to help them out. So I asked the help of my family. So all of the processes of this. And the funny thing was that when the boy was about to finish his treatment, I was happy, not because the boy was going to finish his treatment. I was happy because now I will have money again in my pocket, because all of my money was going to that young boy. But to my amazement, God really has his way, because before he finished his chemotherapy, they invited me to a Christmas party. And I did go to meet up with their doctor. And when I got there, here in Low, 28 kids, also sick with cancer, and they had no money. So I was again challenged. And the doctor, who was a sister of a priest, told me about the story of these kids. And I said, oh my goodness, again, compassion. And I told her, don't worry, I'll help them. And I guess it's ignorance again, or pride, I don't know. So I started helping all 28 kids. And the beautiful thing about it is I kept on learning about my own weaknesses. Because at first I thought it had to be all about my ability, so how to help them. So that's when I went to business. I bought cars, sold cars, thinking that I was doing a good thing. But every time I earned money, the bills were more than what I earned. Until that point, I got so frustrated that I had to ask God, what do you want really from me? Do you really want me to help with these kids and you're not giving me money? So I thought, maybe God wanted something different from me. So I thought, maybe God wanted me to become a healer. And I tried to prepare myself. I thought you could prepare yourself to becoming a healer. I fasted, I prayed a lot. But when I felt that I was already ready to heal, I asked all the kids. I had then, back then, around 30 already, kids with cancer. I asked them to our home. I started praying. I started doing what healers do. Not even one got healed. And that frustrated me the more. Until that moment that I said, Lord, I really don't know what you want from me. And that's when I said, I surrender. And that's when the grace came in. When I started saying, this is your, I don't know what else to do, then that's when the graces came in. I suddenly realized that it was God who had to do everything. The only thing I had to do was facilitate everything. And right now, we're helping out 383 kids. And all of them are receiving for free their chemotherapies. Because people came in, the right people. Again, the only thing I had to do was talk to them, tell them about the story of these kids, and then everything came into place. And all of this changed me. Even from the very first time I was helping that young boy, it changed me already, because back then, the little I was earning, it was all for my needs. All for my needs. And I don't know. I wasn't that simple kind of person that would buy just the simple things. Whenever I had money, I also looked at the bright and shiny stuff. And I love buying things with brands. So I knew that was enough, because I was buying stuff for myself. But when this young boy came, suddenly I had no money. And everything I had to go to that young boy. Then suddenly it became a big group, all my efforts. And that's when I learned how to pray more.
What gives you hope, despite everything that's going on in the world, despite everything that's going on in the church? What gives you hope for the life of the church?
My life, the experience I've been given, the gift of having experienced all of these things, the gift of my own conversion. All of these have taught me that there is always hope, because there is God. And the grace of God is above all of us. It's beyond anything we could put as an obstacle. And if I don't believe in that, my goodness, there's no sense of me being a priest and as a bishop. And every experience I've had in my life is a lesson in hope. It's a lesson in trusting in God's grace. And if this is true, my goodness, I don't see any problem that the church will never survive. The church has survived it for so long, because it is God's church, not ours. Heavenly Father, in so many ways, life is a beautiful gift of your wisdom. For this reason, I now ask you, as one of your ministers, as a successor of the apostles, I ask your blessing, your Spirit, to come everybody here, for everybody who needs the blessing. I ask you to bless each one of us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
If you have good news, we expect you to want to share it. Salvation in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who for love of us and for our salvation came down from heaven. Salvation in his name, and he is the only Savior, is what we are on earth for. Therefore, all those who spread the good news of salvation in Jesus Christ, we should encourage them. I can speak, but how many people can I reach alone? But the media, the television people, the radio, the newspapers, and all those who use the computer and its derivatives in various ways to spread the gospel, we must thank them, we must encourage them, we must work with them so that they can continue to spread the good news. There's so much news that is not so wonderful in the world, but there is also news that is wonderful on the gospel of Jesus Christ. We encourage them and beg God to bless them, especially the Shalom World TV. God bless you.
Shalom World, God's own channel.